Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast is English Learning for Meetings. Now let's step away from the title for just a second and ground this in reality. Because the comprehensive guide we are exploring today highlights a scenario that I guarantee is going to sound incredibly familiar to you. I really want you to picture this.
Oh, I think we all know this feeling.
Right. So let's introduce a hypothetical professional. We'll call him Alex. Now, Alex is a project manager. He is absolutely brilliant at his job. He is sitting in a conference room, or maybe he's staring at a grid of faces on a virtual call. The pre-meeting small talk is wrapping up. People are settling in. The chairperson officially opens the discussion. And then the conversational spotlight swings directly to Alex.
And that is the moment of truth.
It's your turn to speak, and the physiological response is almost instantaneous. Your heart rate spikes, your palms might get a little clammy, and here is the truly agonizing part of this entire experience. You possess the perfect, brilliant answer in your native language.
The technical expertise is 100% there.
It is. But the English words, they're completely blocked. It feels like a steel door has just slammed shut in your prefrontal cortex. You're certainly not alone in this. Millions of professionals globally face this monumental cognitive challenge every single day.
Yeah, they really do.
We're talking about one of the most demanding sociolinguistic environments imaginable. It requires you to listen actively, decode cultural nuances, formulate a strategic response, and then deliver it clearly. And you're doing all of this in real time with an audience that is actively evaluating you.
I mean, it is an incredibly high-pressure situation, and it really delves into the psychological barrier this creates. And I want to reframe this entirely for you right now. Communicating effectively in high-stakes business meetings is not some innate magical charisma that you are simply born with.
No, it's really not.
It's a highly specific learned skill. And like any technical skill, it relies on a recognizable architecture. It utilizes predictable formulas and structural markers. Once you understand the hidden blueprint of how these corporate interactions are constructed, that steel door in your brain, it starts to open.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right, because the cognitive overload fades. You are no longer trying to anticipate chaos. You know the sequence of events that is coming next. You transition from panicking about vocabulary to simply plugging your existing expertise into a well-established framework.
That structural perspective really changes the approach. It reminds me of cognitive load theory. If your brain isn't spending 80% of its energy just trying to figure out the chaotic flow of a conversation, you can actually allocate that energy toward formulating your thoughts.
Spot on. You are removing the meta work of the meeting.
So our mission today is to provide you with that comprehensive blueprint. We are going to explore the mechanics of these interactions, from a quick, 5-person daily huddle, all the way to a massive, high-stakes virtual presentation with international stakeholders.
We are going to cover all of it.
We will decode the vocabulary, analyze the high-level strategies, and crucially, uncover the unwritten cultural rules of global business English. By the end of this deep dive, you will have the linguistic tools to walk into any room and participate with genuine authority.
Let's really ground this by looking at the sheer volume of time at stake here and the anatomy of how these gatherings actually function. Because the statistics from the professional sector are just staggering.
They really are.
The average corporate professional spends anywhere from 15 to 25 hours a week actively participating in meetings.
When you stop and really process that number, it is astounding. 25 hours is essentially over half of your entire working week spent just navigating this one specific type of communication.
Undeniably, it represents a massive portion of your career life cycle. And this highlights why mastering this environment is non-negotiable. If you are continually sidelined by a language barrier in these rooms, your career trajectory will face a severe bottleneck.
Yeah, that's a harsh reality.
And we need to recognize the nature of the communication happening here. These are not casual chats by the water cooler. This is high-stakes corporate theater. We are analyzing environments where budgets are slashed or approved, where complex cross-departmental negotiations occur, and where performance is scrutinized.
Right.
The linguistic choices you make in these specific micro-moments carry disproportionate weight. A strategically placed diplomatic phrase can align an entire room to your vision, whereas a poorly chosen, overly blunt translation from your native language can trigger instant defensiveness.
That brings up a fascinating point regarding the professional image factor. It deals with the sociolinguistics of competence. Whether we want to admit it or not, human beings use language as a proxy for intelligence.
We do it subconsciously all the time.
Your colleagues and clients are constantly forming real-time judgments about your overall capability, based heavily on how you articulate your ideas. When you deploy the right structural markers and idiomatic phrasing, people subconsciously perceive you as more reliable. They view you as leadership material. Technical competence is often overshadowed if the communication competence isn't matching it.
That is right on the mark. And we have to factor in the reality of the globalized workforce. Let's say our hypothetical project manager, Alex, is based in Berlin, working for a German company.
Okay.
He is surrounded by German-speaking colleagues. But the moment his company initiates a partnership with a vendor in Tokyo or a client in São Paulo, the default language immediately shifts to English.
Without a doubt.
It is the undisputed currency of global business. Fluency in this specific subset of corporate English is the universal key that unlocks cross-border mobility.
And complicating all of this is the permanent shift to virtual environments. The reliance on Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet has fundamentally altered the baseline expectations. Looking at the data on linguistic friction, virtual meetings actually double the cognitive load for non-native speakers.
They absolutely do. The sensory deprivation of a virtual call is intense. In a physical boardroom, you rely heavily on peripheral data. You can read the room's energy. You can catch a subtle shift in posture that indicates someone is about to interject.
Yeah, you can use eye contact to hold the floor.
Exactly. Well, right on the money. On a screen, that nonverbal data is severely compressed or entirely absent. Furthermore, you are battling audio latency, compressed connection quality, and that split attention phenomenon of people simultaneously dropping links and comments in the sidebar chat.
It's just a lot to process at once.
But the most significant pressure point is the altered perception of silence. In a physical room, a 5-second pause while you gather your thoughts feels natural, even thoughtful. On a virtual call, a 5-second silence feels like an agonizing eternity.
Oh, it feels like the internet connection just died.
Spot on. It creates this artificial pressure cooker where you feel compelled to respond the millisecond someone stops talking.
So how do we dismantle that pressure cooker? You mentioned earlier that there is a predictable anatomy to these interactions. If we can map out this blueprint, we can effectively neutralize the anxiety of the unknown.
Anticipation is truly your most powerful defense mechanism. Regardless of the industry, whether you are in software development, finance, or manufacturing, almost every professional gathering follows a rigid 6-phase sequence.
Okay, let's break those down.
Phase 1 is the opening, where the tone and agenda are established. Phase 2 is reviewing previous actions, which is the accountability and follow-up stage.
Makes sense.
Phase 3 is the main discussion, the core arena where ideas are presented and debated. Phase 4 is decision-making, the pivot point where consensus is sought. Phase 5 is assigning action items, basically translating talk into labor. And finally, Phase 6 is the closing.
When you view a meeting through this structural lens, it ceases to be a chaotic free-for-all. It becomes a predictable narrative arc. And when you know undeniably which phase you are currently navigating, you instantly know which specific category of vocabulary you need to retrieve from your memory.
I find that incredibly clarifying.
Yeah.
It is the difference between wandering through a forest and walking down a well-marked trail.
So let's step onto that trail and explore phase 1 and 2, setting the tone and following up. Let's put you in the driver's seat. You are the chairperson. You are staring at a room or a screen full of distracted individuals checking their emails. What is the linguistic mechanism to wrangle that attention?
The role of the chairperson requires a delicate balance of authority and hospitality. You want to command the room without sounding dictatorial. You should avoid blunt commands like, okay, listen to me now.
Yeah, that never goes over well.
Instead, the professional standard relies on established transitional signposts. You might say, let's get started, shall we? The shall we softens the directive into a polite invitation.
It's very collaborative.
Right. In a more formal setting, I'd like to call this meeting to order, immediately signals a shift from social time to business time. A highly effective strategy is to acknowledge the value of their presence. You say, shall we begin? I know everyone has a demanding schedule today. That builds immediate social capital.
And once you have their focus, clarity is paramount. You have to state the objective without ambiguity. Something like, our primary objective today is to finalize the Q3 rollout strategy, or the purpose of today's meeting is to. This acts as a conversational anchor, ensuring everyone's mental framework is aligned from minute 1.
But what if you are navigating this not as the chair, but as a participant? Let's go back to our project manager, Alex. Alex has an urgent budget issue that wasn't included on the official agenda. He needs to bring it up, but hijacking the meeting midway through is a terrible career move. What is the protocol here?
This touches on the unwritten rules of corporate etiquette. The optimal time to alter the agenda is the moment it is introduced, right during this opening phase. You politely request an addendum.
How would he phrase that?
You could say, "Before we dive in, could I request a brief addition to the agenda?" Alternatively, you can deploy a classic piece of institutional terminology, AOB, which stands for any other business.
Ah, yes, AOB.
It originates from traditional parliamentary procedure, but is heavily utilized in corporate environments today. You say, "I have a brief item regarding the budget I'd like to bring up under any other business, if time permits." By using this phrasing, you demonstrate complete respect for the established structure while still fiercely advocating for your project's needs.
That is a brilliant way to insert yourself without disrupting the flow. Now, assuming the meeting is open and aligned, we naturally progress to phase 2, accountability. This is the status update arena. This is where everyone reports on their previous commitments.
There's a fascinating idiomatic phrase here. If you rely on direct translation, you might sound quite robotic and say, "What is the status of the marketing project?" But native speakers have a very specific spatial metaphor they use instead. They say, "Where do we stand on?"
Where do we stand on the marketing campaign? It is a phenomenal phrase. It shifts the language from a rigid interrogative demand to a collaborative spatial assessment. It implies that we are all on this journey together, looking at the same map.
I love that imagery.
Now, when you are on the receiving end of that query, you are required to deliver an update. If the news is positive, brevity is your best friend. "I'm pleased to report we are on track," or "everything is proceeding on schedule."
But corporate reality dictates that things frequently go wrong.
They absolutely do.
And what is truly fascinating from a sociolinguistic perspective is how English business culture approaches the delivery of negative news.
This is a critical nuance. You will very rarely hear a seasoned professional sit in a boardroom and bluntly state, "We failed," or "We messed up the timeline." The language is always heavily softened.
Right, there's a very specific phrase for this, hit a snag. I want to unpack the imagery behind this. Why is it strategically superior to say, "Unfortunately, we've hit a snag with our primary supplier," instead of "the supplier failed us"?
It all comes down to corporate damage control and linguistic framing. The word failure carries a heavy, permanent, and often fatalistic weight. It triggers panic. A snag, on the other hand, originates from the textile industry.
Like a piece of clothing.
Well, spot on. It is a small, unexpected catch or tear in a piece of fabric, like a sweater catching on a nail. When you inform a room that you have hit a snag, you are communicating several complex ideas simultaneously.
Okay, let's break those down.
First, you are acknowledging a problem, maintaining transparency. Second, you are implying that the problem was an external, unexpected variable. Third, and most crucially, a snag is something you can untangle.
So it's fixable.
Right. It implies that the obstacle is temporary and that you are actively managing the fix. It dramatically softens the emotional blow to the stakeholders while keeping your professional credibility entirely intact.
It is remarkable how a simple textile metaphor can act as a shield for your competence. But what happens when you can't blame a supplier? What is the protocol for transparency when you are simply behind schedule because the work was harder than expected? Attempting to hide a delay is universally a terrible strategy.
Transparency is the currency of trust in business, but the packaging of that transparency is everything. You want to utilize vocabulary that demonstrates you are still the one holding the steering wheel.
So no panic.
No panic. Instead of saying something reductive like, "It took way too long," you elevate the vocabulary and use a word like anticipated. You state, "The integration phase is taking longer than anticipated. Here is our revised timeline."
That sounds much more controlled.
It does. The word anticipated shows that you are a professional who creates forecasts, and when reality diverges from the forecast, you adjust. You might also explicitly frame your honesty as a virtue. "I want to be fully transparent with the room. We are currently running behind schedule on this specific deliverable." Owning the delay, rather than letting someone else point it out, actually reinforces your authority.
The takeaway there is profound. Admitting a flaw using high-level controlled vocabulary makes you appear vastly more competent than trying to mask it with panicked, fragmented language.
Absolutely.
This naturally leads us into phase 3, the main discussion. This is the crucible. This is where you are expected to articulate your complex ideas. And for a non-native speaker, the pressure of synthesizing your thoughts while 10 people silently evaluate you can trigger a complete mental freeze.
It's the deer in the headlights moment.
Right. You might start rambling, lose your narrative thread, and suddenly you're talking in circles. How do we engineer a safeguard against this?
The fail-safe mechanism here is the implementation of signposting language. Think of actual signposts on a complex highway system. They inform the driver of their current location and their upcoming destination. You must provide that exact same navigational aid to your listeners.
So you're giving them a verbal map.
Spot on. When adrenaline floods your system, your brain's instinct is to rush through the information to escape the spotlight. Signposting acts as a braking mechanism, forcing you to structure your output. You rely on phrases like, first of all, secondly, and finally, or you might announce your structure up front. Let me break this complex issue down into two distinct parts.
It functions almost like delivering a verbal table of contents before you launch into the actual content.
Without a doubt. And the psychological benefit to you, the speaker, is immense. If you begin by stating, there are 3 primary reasons why I advocate for this approach, your brain now has a highly restricted, secure pathway to walk down. It actively prevents the rambling response.
It keeps you honest.
Yeah. And when you arrive at the conclusion of your argument, you deploy a closing signpost. You say, in a nutshell. Or, the core takeaway I want to emphasize is, this is vital because even if your grammar stumbled slightly during the explanation, the closing signpost ensures your ultimate message lands with clarity and impact.
So you have laid out your verbal architecture, you have signposted your argument. But an opinion without foundation is useless in a high-stakes environment. You have to back it up with empirical weight. What are the linguistic anchors for introducing evidence?
You need seamless transitions from subjective opinion to objective reality. Anchoring phrases like, according to the latest Q2 data, or the market research clearly indicates that, provide that necessary weight. Furthermore, if you are discussing abstract theories or strategies, you must tether them to reality.
How do you do that?
The phrase, let me give you a concrete example, is incredibly potent. The adjective concrete is deliberate. It implies something solid, tangible, and unyielding. It shifts the conversation from theory to undeniable fact.
Now, we are arriving at what I genuinely believe is the most critical cultural paradigm shift in this entire analysis. We have to do a deep dive into the concept of hedging, because this is where direct translations cause the most corporate friction.
Oh, without question, this is a massive stumbling block.
In many cultures, and let's look at a direct evaluative culture like Germany or the Netherlands, if you have done the math and you know your project plan is correct, you state it as an absolute truth. You look at your colleagues and say, this is the best plan. We must execute this immediately. Your timeline is wrong. But taking this approach in an English-speaking business context can be a massive misstep.
It can be a catastrophic misstep. This touches on a deeply rooted sociolinguistic divide regarding how cultures perceive politeness and authority. In many high-context or direct communication cultures, bluntness is equated with honesty and efficiency.
You're just saving time.
Right. However, the hallmark of sophisticated executive-level English, particularly in North America and the UK, is the pervasive use of hedging. Hedging is the intentional use of cautious, softening language to present an idea not as a rigid fact, but as a strong suggestion.
Let's illustrate this for the listener. What does a hedge statement actually sound like in the wild?
Let's take the direct statement. Your timeline is impossible. A professional utilizing hedging would say, I'm not entirely sure that timeline is fully feasible given our current resources.
That sounds vastly different.
It does. Instead of commanding, we must shift our strategy, you would say, it might be worth considering a shift in our strategy. Or introducing a new concept, you might say, this is just a preliminary thought, but what if we? You are cushioning the absolute nature of your statements.
I know for a fact that to many learners, this sounds maddening. It sounds inefficient. And worse, it sounds like you lack conviction. Why would you pretend to be unsure when you have the data? Why is this verbal cushioning actually considered a superpower?
Because it is fundamentally rooted in the concept of psychological safety and saving face. In these specific business cultures, hyperdirect communication is frequently processed emotionally as aggressive, arrogant, or completely dismissive of the collective expertise in the room.
That makes a lot of sense.
When you deploy hedging, you are intentionally leaving conversational space for others to contribute. You are signaling, I have a highly educated perspective on this, but I respect the hierarchy and the intellect of this room enough to invite your scrutiny.
It turns a lecture into a discussion.
100%. It transforms a monologue into a collaboration. It proves that you possess high emotional intelligence and cultural fluency. You aren't weakening your argument, you are ensuring your audience remains receptive to it.
That is a brilliant distinction. Hedging keeps the door open, whereas blunt certainty slams it shut. And this flows seamlessly into phase 4 and 5, navigating disagreement and asking questions. Let's return to Alex. Someone in the meeting proposes an initiative, and Alex knows, based on historical data, that it is guaranteed to fail.
Oh boy.
The visceral instinct is to say, no, you are incorrect. Based on our deep dive into hedging, why is that fatal?
Saying, no, you're wrong, is the conversational equivalent of dropping a grenade on the conference table. The instant those words land, the recipient's brain enters a defensive state. Their cognitive focus shifts entirely from analyzing your logic to preparing a counterattack to protect their professional ego. You have instantly evaporated the collaborative atmosphere.
So how does Alex dismantle a bad idea without starting a corporate war?
He relies on polite disagreement frameworks. The architecture of these frameworks is always validate first, pivot second, you acknowledge their contribution to satisfy the ego, and then you introduce the friction.
What's a good phrase for that?
He might say, I see things slightly differently. That adverb, slightly, is doing a tremendous amount of heavy lifting to de-escalate the tension. Or, I understand the perspective you're coming from, but looking at the data, I have a different view.
What if he's talking to his boss?
If Alex is contradicting someone significantly senior to him, he would deploy the ultimate deferential shield. With all due respect, I think there might be another angle we need to consider here.
With all due respect is essentially a diplomatic passport. It allows you to safely traverse incredibly dangerous hierarchical territory.
Yeah.
Now, what if the opposite is true? What if someone proposes an idea and it is absolutely brilliant? You don't just want to say a flat yes. We want to equip the listener with an elite idiom for total agreement.
Oh, I know the one you're going for.
If someone perfectly articulates a solution, you look at them and say, you hit the nail on the head.
So spot on. Hit the nail on the head is universally recognized. It evokes the imagery of a carpenter striking the exact center of a nail with perfect precision. It conveys enthusiastic, flawless agreement, and native speakers utilize it constantly.
And once you have navigated the agreement or disagreement, the next logical step is to propose the alternative path. You do this through collaborative questioning. Instead of that approach, what if we tried? Or could I propose an alternative solution? Notice the phrasing. You're asking permission to guide the ship rather than violently grabbing the steering wheel.
I want to pause and zoom in on that concept of asking questions. There is a pervasive, deeply ingrained myth among professionals, both native and non-native speakers, that asking a question in a meeting exposes you as the weak link.
Oh, absolutely. The internal monologue is always, if I ask what that acronym means, everyone will instantly know I'm out of my depth. Let's completely dismantle that anxiety.
I am thrilled we're addressing this because the reality is the exact inverse of that fear. In a high-functioning corporate environment, asking strategic, precisely timed questions is a potent indicator of engagement, critical thinking, and profound self-confidence. Yes, the individual who silently nods along while completely lost is the individual who inevitably causes a catastrophic error 2 weeks later. Requesting clarification demonstrates a commitment to accuracy. You can utilize elegant phrases like, could you elaborate on that point regarding the Q3 budget? This is a highly sophisticated way of saying, tell me more, or just to ensure I'm interpreting this correctly.
What is the protocol for when the barrier isn't your vocabulary, but the technology? You are halfway through a critical Zoom presentation, the speaker's audio violently stutters for 10 seconds, and you completely miss the core metric. You cannot simply guess. We need an idiom that handles this gracefully.
The indispensable phrase for technological failure is, run that by me again. You say, my apologies, the audio dropped out for a moment. Could you run that last metric by me again?
That's very natural.
It is appropriately casual, but fits perfectly into any formal business context. It literally translates to re-explain that concept to me, but it completely removes the awkwardness of saying, I didn't hear a word you just said.
Beyond just catching missed words, there is the proactive strategy of paraphrasing. This is when you synthesize what the speaker just said and repeat it back to them using your own linguistic framing, just to lock in the alignment. You might say, let me paraphrase to make sure I've captured this accurately. We're prioritizing the software patch for Thursday, not Friday. Is that correct?
Paraphrasing is arguably the single most effective active listening mechanism available to you. It achieves 3 vital outcomes simultaneously.
Let's hear them.
First, it objectively verifies your comprehension. Second, it provides the speaker with the deep psychological satisfaction of feeling truly heard and understood. Third, and most importantly for corporate survival, it creates a permanent, verbalized record within the meeting of what was actually agreed upon. It is a masterful technique for managing the flow of chaotic information.
Managing the flow that transitions us perfectly into our next phase of the blueprint. Sections 6, 7, and 8. Managing flow, decisions, and action. We have all endured meetings that spectacularly derail. The team is supposed to be discussing the marketing budget, and suddenly 2 engineers are locked in a 20-minute debate about a completely unrelated server issue. The clock is ticking. How do you tactfully rein that chaos in?
Wrangling a derailed meeting requires the art of the tactful interruption. You must acknowledge the validity of their tangent, but firmly relocate it outside the current time constraints. A highly effective, universally understood phrase is, "Let's table that for now."
Table that. That's a great one.
Now, a brief sociolinguistic detour here. In American corporate English, to table a topic means to postpone it indefinitely or to a later specified date. Interestingly, in traditional British English, it can occasionally mean to bring a topic to the table for immediate debate.
Wow, that could cause some confusion.
It could. However, in the modern globalized corporate ecosystem, especially when tethered to the phrase "for now," it is almost universally interpreted as, "Let's pause this discussion and move on."
I think "let's table that for now" is a fantastic tool to have in the arsenal. But what about the polite interrupter's ultimate secret weapon? When someone is simply monologuing, they aren't reading the room, and you need to forcefully cut them off because the meeting ends in 4 minutes.
The absolute best phrase for this delicate operation is, "In the interest of time," you interject with, "In the interest of time, I think we need to transition to the final agenda item."
That's incredibly smooth.
It is a psychological masterpiece because you are entirely removing personal blame. You aren't telling your colleague that they talk too much. You are uniting both of you against a common enemy, the clock. You are positioning yourself as the benevolent guardian of everyone's precious schedule, a move that always earns silent gratitude from the rest of the room.
Blame the clock, not the colleague. It's brilliant. Now consider the inverse problem. You are navigating a meeting where 2 loud voices are monopolizing the airspace, and you have highly competent introverts sitting in total silence. How do you bring them into the fold without making them feel interrogated?
You issue a targeted, low-pressure invitation using conversational phrasing. You look at them and ask, "Sarah, what's your take on this?" The phrase, "What's your take?" simply translates to, "What is your perspective?"
It's very casual.
It is deliberately less formal than demanding, "Sarah, what is your strategic analysis of this paradigm?" By lowering the linguistic barrier to entry, you make it significantly easier for the quiet professional to step into the conversation.
All right, so the diverse perspectives have been shared. Everyone's take is on the table. Eventually, the talking has to stop and a choice must be made. We enter the decision-making phase. What is the specific vocabulary required to lock this down?
You need terminology that actively measures alignment. You scan the room and ask, is everyone on board with this revised approach? The idiom "on board" borrows from nautical imagery. It asks if everyone is on the same ship, committed to heading in the same direction.
And what's the ultimate goal here?
Your ultimate objective in this phase is to reach a consensus, which denotes a general, collective agreement where even those who disagree are willing to commit to the path forward.
But corporate reality is messy. Frequently, you hit the decision phase and the necessary data is missing, or the interpersonal tensions are simply running too hot. You need a mechanism to hit the pause button on the decision itself without looking indecisive.
Without a doubt, forcing a premature decision is dangerous. When you need to de-escalate, you deploy the phrase, "Let's sleep on this and reconvene next week."
Sleep on it.
Yes, the idiom "sleep on it" implies a deliberate strategic pause, allowing the subconscious to process complex variables and drastically reducing emotional reactivity. And the verb "reconvene" is a fantastic elevated piece of vocabulary that simply means to gather the group together again.
I always appreciate reconvene. It elevates the professionalism of the moment far beyond a simple, "let's talk about it later." Finally, we hit phase 8, assigning work. This is arguably the most critical phase. If a meeting concludes and no one knows who is doing what, You haven't had a meeting. You had a hallucination. How do we ensure discussions materialize into actual labor?
This requires total fluency in the vocabulary of corporate accountability. In a high-level environment, you do not hand out chores or tasks. You assign responsibilities to distinct work streams.
Work streams. That sounds very official.
It is. A work stream is a categorized parallel track of activity within a larger project architecture. You state, David, you will own the development work stream. Maria, you are leading the compliance work stream. Following that, you must establish absolute clarity regarding timeframes. A pervasive acronym you must recognize is EOB.
End of business.
Right on the mark. I need that analysis submitted by EOB Friday. It removes all ambiguity about whether Friday means Friday morning or 11:59 p.m.
That is crucial for setting expectations.
And the capstone of accountability is defining the deliverable. A deliverable is the concrete, tangible asset you expect to receive at the end of the work stream. You must eradicate assumptions by asking, just to ensure total alignment, the deliverable for this phase is a comprehensive slide deck, correct?
This specific vocabulary prevents that disastrous scenario where you expected a 50-page data analysis and your colleague thought you just wanted a quick email summary.
100%.
Using the word deliverable instantly rebrands you from a participant to a project manager. It carries immense professional gravity. This brings us to Section 6. Phase 9, the strong close and real-world scenarios. Ending a meeting effectively is akin to the closing argument in a trial. It dictates exactly what everyone remembers as they walk out the door. How do we engineer a powerful wrap-up?
A masterful close is entirely focused on final alignment. You must synthesize the hour. You utilize phrases like, let me quickly recap the key decisions we've made today, or just to guarantee we are all on the same page.
On the same page is such a classic.
It is the holy grail of corporate communication. It means everyone's mental model of the project is identical. From an administrative perspective, the chairperson will state, I will circulate the minutes by EOB.
To circulate means to distribute widely, right?
Right. And minutes are the official written documentation of the agreements and deliverables. Finally, you employ concluding signposts. If there is no further business, let's wrap up. Meeting adjourned.
I want to take all of this theory, all of these frameworks, and inject them into some highly specific real-world scenarios. Let's return to Alex. Scenario 1, a weekly team update. Alex is running an in-person, agile methodology stand-up. He opens the session, establishes the focus, and then looks at his lead developer and says, David, could you kick things off for us? I absolutely appreciate the energy of that phrase.
Kick things off is a direct linguistic inheritance from American football or soccer, referring to the strike that starts the actual gameplay. It is a highly dynamic, energetic, yet entirely professional mechanism for passing the conversational baton to the first speaker.
So in this agile scenario, Alex then pivots to risk assessment and asks, are there any blockers we need to be aware of? This is foundational project management terminology.
Yes. A blocker is any internal or external obstacle halting forward momentum. As the update progresses, Alex inquires about dependencies.
I want to magnify the word dependencies because it represents a massive upgrade in professional maturity. If Alex is waiting for the graphic design team to finalize the logos before his team can code the website, the amateur approach is to whine, I can't do my job because I'm stuck waiting for the design team. But framing it as, our coding sprint currently has a dependency on the design assets, completely changes the emotional temperature of the room.
You have hit on something crucial there. The phrase, I'm waiting for them, reeks of personal grievance and finger-pointing. It invites conflict. Utilizing the term dependency elevates the conversation from personal blame to systemic analysis.
It's much more objective.
It portrays the issue as an objective, structural reality of the project timeline. It is emotionally neutral and highly analytical. Continuing with Alex's scenario, the design team presents a concept that is radically abrasive for a conservative client. A team member diplomatically suggests, perhaps we need to tone that down slightly.
Tone it down.
It's an exceptional phrasal verb. It means to reduce the intensity, aggression, or boldness of something. It is a highly diplomatic way to critique design, copy, or even someone's overly aggressive behavior.
Those phrasal verbs act as the absolute mortar holding conversational English together. Let's escalate the complexity. Scenario 2, a virtual meeting with international colleagues. Alex is managing a massive Zoom grid featuring stakeholders in London, San Francisco, and Tokyo. He begins by stating, the primary objective today is to align on the global marketing campaign. I'll initiate this by sharing the brief. Let's dissect the mechanics of align on and brief.
To align on, a concept connects directly back to our discussion of being on the same page. It is the arduous process of taking multiple, often contradictory regional viewpoints and forging them into a single, unified strategy.
And what about the brief?
A brief, in this context, is the foundational, sacred document of the project. It outlines the historical context, the core objectives, the target demographics, and the hard constraints. During this complex virtual negotiation, the stakeholder from Tokyo expresses concern that the highly aggressive American sales copy might alienate the Japanese market. They articulate this by saying, "I'm concerned this specific messaging won't resonate with our demographic."
Resonate. It is such a profoundly evocative word to use in a business context. It borrows from the physics of sound, the idea that it doesn't just logically compute, but it strikes a chord that vibrates at the same frequency as the listener's internal values.
100%. When a campaign or a message resonates, it creates a deep emotional connection. If it fails to resonate, it is perceived as tone-deaf or irrelevant. It is an incredibly sophisticated, high-level vocabulary choice for evaluating communication strategies.
Let's push Alex into the ultimate high-pressure environment. Scenario 3. Senior leadership. Alex has secured a 10-minute window to present a new product feature to the C-suite. This is the boardroom. You do not bring entry-level vocabulary into this room. He begins his pitch by stating, this user experience flaw is generating a 25% drop-off rate within the first week because our current onboarding architecture is causing too much friction.
When you enter the C-suite, you must speak their native dialect, and their dialect is entirely composed of data, systems, and risk analysis. Drop-off rate is the harsh statistical reality of the percentage of users who abandon your platform at a specific juncture.
Onboarding.
Onboarding describes the comprehensive system of integrating a new user or a new employee into your ecosystem. Alex is not complaining about a bad design. He is identifying a systemic failure that is bleeding revenue. When the CEO inevitably demands a timeline for the fix, Alex responds, "We are recommending a phased approach rollout."
Hearing the phrase phased approach rollout is basically a tranquilizer for an anxious executive. It reassures them that you are not going to gamble the company's stability on one chaotic, massive launch day. You are introducing the change incrementally, measuring the impact at every step.
Absolutely. The rollout is the actual deployment of the feature into the market. Doing it in phases signals that Alex is actively mitigating risk. Senior leaders are universally obsessed with risk mitigation. By deploying those exact words, Alex proves he understands their deepest anxieties without having to explicitly state it. He speaks the language of corporate governance.
All right, we have arrived at one of the most critical segments of our analysis. Section 7, the essential glossary and common mistakes. The corporate world is infamous for its buzzwords. They can sound ridiculous, but if you don't understand them, you are locked out of the conversation. Let's do a rapid-fire breakdown. I will toss out a piece of corporate jargon that frequently baffles learners, and I want you to excavate its meaning and provide the context. Let's kick things off with brainstorm.
Brainstorm. This means to generate a massive volume of ideas freely and rapidly, with a strict prohibition on immediate criticism or judgment. Contextual usage. We are hitting a wall on the design. Let's get the team in a room on Thursday and brainstorm some out-of-the-box solutions. It dictates a highly creative, psychologically safe environment.
Excellent. Next up, drill down.
Drill down. This borrows imagery from the oil or mining industry. It means to transition from a broad, high-level overview into extreme granular detail. Context. The quarterly revenue looks solid from a macro perspective, but we need to drill down into the European sales figures to understand the recent dip.
Here's one that permeates every office globally, touch base.
Touch base. This originates from the American sport of baseball. In the corporate ecosystem, it means to initiate a brief, highly informal conversation to verify progress or alignment. Context. I know your bandwidth is stretched today. Let's just touch base for 5 minutes tomorrow morning to ensure we're ready for the client call.
Closely related to that, circle back.
Circle back. This implies a conversational loop. It means to pause a topic currently under discussion and promise to return to it at a specified future point. Context. We simply don't have the engineering data to make that call right now, so let's circle back to this specific point during next week's sync.
Now here is a personal favorite because of how bizarre it is when you think about it. Bandwidth. We're obviously not talking about internet routers here.
Bandwidth, in modern corporate parlance, has been co-opted to describe human cognitive capacity, available time, or emotional energy. Context. I would love to assist with the audit, but I simply do not have the bandwidth this month. It is a highly sanitized, professional way of saying, I am exhausted and completely overworked, without sounding like you are complaining.
Next word. Synergy.
Synergy. This is perhaps the most parodied buzzword in existence. It originates in biology, but in business, it describes a collaborative effort that produces a result vastly superior to what the individuals could achieve alone, the idea that 1 + 1 = 3. Context. If we merge the data streams from the marketing and sales departments, we will unlock incredible operational synergy.
Let's look at leverage, specifically used as a verb.
Leverage. Originating from physics and finance, to leverage means to utilize an existing asset, advantage, or relationship to its absolute maximum potential. Context. We have an incredible relationship with our legacy clients. We need to leverage that trust to upsell the new software suite.
Next, pivot.
Pivot. This gained massive popularity in Silicon Valley startup culture. It means to keep one foot planted in your core competency while fundamentally shifting your strategic direction because the original path has failed. Context. The initial market response to the app was abysmal, so we are going to pivot our strategy and target enterprise clients instead.
And finally, low-hanging fruit.
Low-hanging fruit. This borrows from agriculture. It refers to the most easily achievable tasks or the fastest wins that require minimal expenditure of effort or resources but yield immediate, visible results. Context. Before we undertake a massive structural overhaul of the website's backend, let's fix the broken links on the homepage that's low-hanging fruit.
Those insights are incredibly illuminating. However, memorizing vocabulary is only half the equation. Understanding the behavioral traps is equally critical. Let's transition into a deep psychological analysis of the top 10 common mistakes that professionals make when operating in a second language during meetings. Mistake number 1, extreme directness when disagreeing. We have analyzed hedging, but let's reiterate the psychological fallout of looking at a colleague and saying, "Your idea is bad."
The fallout is the destruction of your relationship capital. Western corporate culture relies heavily on the illusion, or at least the performance, of consensus and mutual respect. Blunt force trauma fractures that illusion. Even if you are factually correct, the room will turn against you because you violated the social contract. You must deploy hedging to maintain the required professional facade.
Mistake number 2 is the inverse of that. Failing to utilize hedging language when presenting your own ideas. If Alex walks in and announces, "We must immediately change our marketing strategy," he sounds like a dictator, particularly if he lacks the hierarchical authority to make that demand. Mistake number 3 is a purely physiological reaction, speaking at warp speed due to nervousness.
This is a profound biological reality. When the adrenaline hits because you are navigating a high-stakes meeting in a second language, your body interprets the situation as a threat. The natural fight-or-flight response is to accelerate your speech to escape the uncomfortable spotlight as rapidly as possible.
But it backfires.
Completely. The irony is that speaking faster degrades your pronunciation, mangles your syntax, and makes it infinitely more difficult for the room to decode your message.
So how does a professional override their own biology in that moment?
You must consciously force yourself to advocate for the strategic pause. You must take a deliberate, literal breath between your sentences. Furthermore, you deploy filler phrases to buy your prefrontal cortex processing time. You say, "That is a complex question. Let me think about that for a moment."
So,
Native speakers utilize these stalling tactics constantly. Taking 3 seconds to formulate a response doesn't make you look incompetent. It makes you look thoughtful, deliberate, and in complete control of the room's pacing.
mistake number 4 is a silent killer. Failing to ask for clarification. We witness this phenomenon constantly. A professional is sitting in a meeting, the speaker uses an acronym they don't know, they lose the narrative thread, and out of sheer panic, they just start nodding their head, performing the pantomime of comprehension.
That is a basic survival mechanism, but it is a career-threatening one. In corporate environments, a nod implies binding agreement. If you nod along to a technical requirement you completely misunderstood, the ensuing failure of the project will rest entirely on your shoulders. You must conquer the fear of looking uninformed.
How do you interrupt gracefully, though?
You must interject and say, "I want to ensure total alignment here. Are you indicating that?" The corporate machine respects the rigorous pursuit of accuracy far more than it respects the fragile facade of instant comprehension.
Mistake number 5. Deploying excessively informal language. This is the failure to read the room. A learner might pick up the phrase, "Yeah, that's awesome, let's just go for it," from watching a Netflix series. But deploying that phrasing in a board meeting with the chief financial officer is a massive miscalculation.
Reading the room requires constant assessment of the hierarchical structure, the emotional temperature, and the financial stakes of the current discussion. If external clients or senior executives are present, your default setting must snap to a highly formal register. You instantly elevate, "Yeah, that's awesome," to "I completely agree, that appears to be a highly viable strategy. Let's proceed with that approach."
Mistake number 6 is a fascinating behavioral swing, dominating the conversation. We see this when a learner who usually struggles finally hits a topic they are deeply passionate about. Their confidence spikes, and they effectively take the meeting hostage.
It is the pendulum of confidence swinging recklessly into the opposite extreme. Being a brilliant contributor means knowing when to relinquish the floor. After you have expertly delivered your signposted argument, you must intentionally re-invite collaboration. You conclude your monologue by stating, "That is my analysis of the data. I'm very interested to hear the room's perspective." That demonstrates elite emotional intelligence.
Mistake number 7, neglecting the summary. If you conclude an hour-long debate by simply saying, "Okay, great meeting, bye," every individual will log off with a completely different interpretation of the agreed-upon reality.
Undeniably true.
Mistake number 8. Number 8, however, is the most pervasive linguistic trap of all. Direct syntactic translation from the native language into English.
Direct translation is a minefield. Every single language possesses its own unique historical idioms and structural logic. If you attempt to map the syntax of German or Mandarin or Spanish directly onto English vocabulary, the result will invariably sound incredibly clunky, abrasive, or unintentionally comical. You cannot translate word for word. You must internalize business English phrases as complete, unbreakable structural units.
Mistake number 9, entering the arena without vocabulary preparation. No professional will walk into a crucial negotiation without reviewing the financials, yet many walk into English meetings without reviewing the agenda to anticipate the specific verbs and nouns they will need to access. And finally, mistake number 10, ignoring the nonverbal bandwidth, particularly in virtual settings.
Your body language is transmitting volumes of data before your microphone even picks up your voice. If you are leaning back with your arms crossed, you are broadcasting defensiveness. If your eyes are darting off screen to check a secondary monitor, you are broadcasting disengagement. To project authority virtually, you must override your instinct to look at the faces on the screen and stare directly into the camera lens to simulate eye contact. You must physically nod to signal active listening. These nonverbal cues drastically amplify the impact of your spoken vocabulary.
Okay, we're going to elevate the altitude of this discussion for Section 8, high-level strategies and real-life extensions. Let's imagine Alex has graduated from team updates. He has been summoned to pitch directly to the executive board. He's in the room with the C-suite. What is the precise architecture of an executive summary? Because we know executives possess zero tolerance for a 20-minute meandering backstory.
The currency of the C-suite is time. They value extreme brevity and bottom-line impact above all else. To survive in that room, you must master the ruthless 3-part framework: the headline, the why, and the ask.
The headline.
You launch immediately into the headline, the inescapable, brutal truth of the situation. The headline today is that our legacy product is losing market share in Europe. You immediately follow with the why, utilizing 2, maximum 3 devastatingly concise data points. Here's why. Our primary competitor's new rollout is outperforming us 3-to-1 in user acquisition.
And then the ask.
And you conclude with the ask, the precise action or resource you demand from them. The ask today is formal approval for a $50,000 budget reallocation to counter their campaign. It is aggressive, it is purely logical, and it demonstrates a profound respect for their cognitive load.
It is incredibly clinical and effective. And when you are occupying that space, your deployment of data must be highly strategic. You cannot rely on vague sentiments like sales are getting a bit better lately. You have to anchor it. If we analyze the year-over-year trends,
Year-over-year, frequently abbreviated as YOY, is foundational executive vocabulary. It isolates the current period's performance and compares it to the exact same period in the preceding year, thereby stripping out misleading seasonal fluctuations. When you look at executive in the I and state, the metrics speak for themselves, demonstrating a 30% YOY increase. You are speaking with irrefutable, undeniable corporate authority.
but let's be realistic. High-level boardrooms aren't just sterile laboratories of data. They are highly volatile political arenas. You have to navigate the complex dynamics of human power. How does a professional ensure their initiative actually survives the gauntlet of the boardroom?
The masterstroke of corporate strategy is realizing that the meeting happens before the meeting actually starts. You must build coalitions. A coalition is a strategic alliance. If Alex is proposing a controversial budget shift, he does not surprise the finance director with it in front of the CEO. He schedules a private one-on-one briefing with the finance director 3 days prior.
That's smart.
He solicits their critique. He integrates their feedback, giving them psychological ownership of the initiative. So when Alex is in the high-stakes meeting and the CEO looks skeptical, Alex can smoothly state, "I've already workshopped this model extensively with the finance team, and we are completely aligned on the projections." He walks into the ambush with built-in momentum and armor.
That is the definition of next-level corporate maneuvering. Now let's extract these linguistic frameworks and apply them beyond the confines of the boardroom. The vocabulary of meeting English permeates every facet of professional life. Consider the terrifying environment of a networking event. You are standing awkwardly with a lukewarm coffee, attempting to initiate small talk with a stranger.
We've all been there.
The vocabulary toolkit is identical. What brings you to this event is a flawless, open-ended opening maneuver. Or consider a job interview, which is fundamentally just a high-stakes meeting where your career is the product being evaluated. You can seize control of the interview by asking, in your view, what does success look like in this position at the 6-month mark?
That is a staggering interview question. It instantly reframes you from a subordinate applicant to a forward-thinking, results-oriented consultant. This exact principle applies to performance reviews. Instead of sitting there passively absorbing your manager's critique, you deploy your meeting vocabulary to equalize the power dynamic. You state, "I deeply appreciate that feedback. Could you perhaps drill down into specific areas where I can elevate my performance?" You transform a one-way evaluation into a collaborative, professional dialogue.
And we see this apply even in micro-interactions. Someone approaches your desk or pings you on a company messaging app. That is a microscopic meeting. You can utilize phrases like, "Hey, do you have a second? I need to run a concept by you," or "Let me loop you in on this email chain."
Loop you in is another fantastic spatial idiom. It paints the picture of bringing an outsider into the inner circle of communication. Whether you are at a water cooler, a job interview, or a global summit, you are pulling from the exact same linguistic toolbox.
So we have mapped the terrain. We have provided you, the listener, with the structural blueprint, the high-level vocabulary, the political strategies, and the cognitive pitfalls to avoid. But theory is useless without execution. How do you actually build the neurological muscle to perform this in real time? We're moving into Section 9, Daily Improvement Hacks. Reading a comprehensive guide is intellectually stimulating, but speaking fluently under pressure requires physical and mental conditioning. What is the actionable protocol you can initiate today?
The first step is acknowledging cognitive limits. You must adopt the phrase of the week methodology. Attempting to cram 50 new corporate idioms into your brain simultaneously will result in complete retention failure. You must micro-target your acquisition.
Just one at a time.
Right. Week 1, your sole objective is to master 3 specific opening and closing frameworks. You write them on a physical sticky note. You attach it to your monitor. You forcefully inject them into your next call. Week 2, you shift your entire focus to the polite disagreement frameworks. By isolating small clusters of vocabulary, you ensure they migrate from your passive understanding into your active, reflex-level vocabulary.
That handles the memory aspect. But what about the physical mechanics of speaking? Countless professionals can read an English business journal with perfect comprehension, but the moment they have to articulate those concepts, their jaw tenses up and the pronunciation falls apart.
This is where we leverage the neurology of language acquisition through a technique called shadowing. Shadowing relies heavily on the brain's mirror neurons. You find a piece of high-quality English audio, a business-focused TED Talk, an executive interview on YouTube, or even a fast-paced corporate drama.
Like Suits of the Office.
Absolutely. You put your headphones on, you listen to the native speaker, and you repeat their words almost simultaneously, trailing them by a split second. Your objective is not just to say the words, but to perfectly mimic their cadence, their strategic pauses, and their intonation. You are literally training the muscles in your jaw, lips, and tongue to produce the physical rhythm of English until it becomes autonomic muscle memory.
I think that is revolutionary. I also highly advocate for the implementation of a meeting vocabulary journal. Every single time you sit in the meeting, even if the meeting is conducted entirely in your native language, keep a dedicated notebook open. Pay intense attention to your internal monologue. Notice the specific moments where you formulate a complex thought in your native language and suddenly realize, I have absolutely no idea how I would translate that exact nuance into professional English.
That's identifying a gap.
Right. You have identified a gap in your armor. Write that native phrase down. After the meeting concludes, do the research to discover the precise, high-level English equivalent. You're effectively crowdsourcing your vocabulary curriculum directly from your own daily job requirements.
That is the definition of high-efficiency learning. Another uncomfortable but profoundly effective hack is auditory self-analysis. Utilize the voice recording application on your smartphone. Manufacture a scenario, pretend you are Alex delivering the executive summary we discussed earlier, and record your delivery. Then, subject yourself to the profound discomfort of listening to the playback.
It's awful but necessary.
It is. Are you rushing the pacing due to imaginary adrenaline? Are your vowels clear? Do you sound like a hesitant subordinate or a confident leader? The recorder provides instant, brutal, objective feedback that your brain simply cannot process while you are in the act of speaking.
Here's the final cognitive hurdle, and crossing it changes the entire paradigm. You must train yourself to think in English to eradicate the terrifying translation lag.
The translation lag is the absolute silent killer of corporate credibility. If a senior vice president asks you a pointed question and your brain receives it in English, translates it into your native language, formulates the strategic defense in your native language, and then attempts to syntactically translate that defense back into English, the resulting silence will be painfully, uncomfortably long.
So how do we stop that?
You dismantle this lag through relentless internal immersion. You must narrate your daily existence in your own head using English. When you are making your morning coffee, think through the sequence of actions in English. When you are commuting to the office, actively rehearse your upcoming negotiations in English. You must force your internal monologue to operate in the target language so the pathways are fully lubricated before the meeting ever begins.
And underlying all of this tactical advice is a necessary philosophical acceptance. You have to embrace the inevitability of mistakes. The trajectory of language mastery is not a clean upward line. Some days you will execute a presentation flawlessly and feel like the CEO of the world. The very next day, you might completely mangle a basic sentence and feel intense imposter syndrome. That volatility is normal.
It is an inescapable component of the process. You must reframe how you view a mistake. A linguistic error is not a reflection of your intellect. It is simply a neutral data point. When you stumble, you analyze the failure, you locate the correct structural phrase, you drill it into your muscle memory, and you deploy it successfully the next time.
Which brings us to the culmination of our deep dive today, our outro. We have traversed an immense sociolinguistic landscape. We have mapped the phases, decoded the hidden cultural variables, and provided the tactical hacks. I want to hand the floor over to you for a final motivational synthesis. For you, the listener sitting there right now, who has a high-stakes, career-defining meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning and who is battling that familiar wave of linguistic dread, what is the absolute core truth you need to hear?
I want you to internalize this concept completely, down to your core. You absolutely do not need perfect, flawless English to be a highly formidable, effective presence in a business meeting. The pursuit of perfection is a paralyzing myth. What you require is clear English. You require confident English. You require structurally sound English. I want you to compare this cognitive journey to the physical act of learning how to ride a bicycle. The very first time you get on the seat, it is a terrifying, overwhelming experience. You wobble, you lose your equilibrium, you overcorrect, you might even fall and scrape your knee.
We've all been there.
The act of simply remaining upright demands 100% of your conscious, agonizing focus. But you refuse to quit. You continue to practice, and inevitably, your brain and your body find their center of gravity. You eventually reach a state where you are no longer consciously analyzing the pedals or the angle of the handlebars. You are simply riding, focusing entirely on your destination. Navigating high-stakes corporate English operates on this exact same neurological principle. The idioms and frameworks that feel incredibly awkward, heavy, and unnatural in your mouth today will, through relentless application, become second nature tomorrow. Remember this, your ideas possess intrinsic, massive value. Your specialized technical expertise is the sole reason you've been invited into that room. Do not allow a mere language barrier to act as an insurmountable wall that suppresses your potential and halts your career trajectory. You possess the required intellect. Start with the foundational frameworks, exhibit profound patience with your own progress, and ruthlessly celebrate every small victory along the way.
That is an incredibly empowering perspective. And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to ponder long after this deep dive concludes. Consider how the mastery of this specific high-level meeting vocabulary yields a dual result. Yes, it fundamentally alters how the other powerful people in the room perceive your competence and authority. But far more importantly, it fundamentally alters how you perceive yourself as a professional. When you are trapped behind the glass wall of a language barrier, your professional identity shrinks. You feel smaller, less capable, and sidelined. But when you finally acquire the exact, sophisticated terminology required to manifest your complex, brilliant ideas into reality, you physically and psychologically step into your own power. You shed the paralyzing weight of the imposter syndrome, and you finally recognize yourself as the leader you genuinely are. Go out there, claim your space, and make your next meeting your best one yet. Like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.